Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thanks for joining me for another weekly lesson. This week we're going to get back to some blues playing. We're going to work our way through a lead study in the style of B.B. King. We'll be soloing over the chord changes to his classic tune, The Thrill Is Gone. This is a minor blues and it's played in the key of B minor. We'll be using the B minor pentatonic scale and we're really going to limit our range to really just the top octave of shape 1 and also the upper octave of shape 2. Let's see exactly how much we can do with just a handful of notes. Phrasing and good technique will be our primary focus here as we try and make things sound as lyrical and smooth as possible. We'll be using a lot of vibrato, string bends, hammer-ons and pull-offs, staccato, interesting timing, and we'll be exploring a very wide dynamic range from whisper quiet to a shout, all courtesy of the picking hand. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, do join me, grab your favourite guitar, get comfy on the sofa, grab a coffee, and let's dig in. Okay, so let's start by outlining the chord changes to The Thrill Is Gone. This type of minor blues tends to have a couple of small little additions that really make it pop. So we're in B minor. Four bars on the 1. To the 4, E minor, or E minor 7 even. Back to the B minor, or B minor 7, whatever you feel like. Now we go to a G9, F sharp 7 with a sharp 9, back home to the 1. So the addition of that G9 chord is pretty cool, right? I always just used to think of it as, if I know where my 5 is, I just go a semitone higher. You can think of it as a sharp 5 if you like. So this would be G7, 3-note voicing. Now what sounds really cool is when melodically you keep this same note on top of both chords. So this note here would be the A at the 10th fret of the B string. Adding that to your G7 3-note voicing gives you a G9. Keeping that same note on top while the 3-note voicing portion of the chord moves down a semitone will give you an F sharp 7 with a sharp 9. Sounds really cool. You could also put the top E in there at the 10th fret, so that would be the D note on top. Keep that on top and the A note on the B string. Now you've got your F sharp 7 sharp 9 but with a sharp 5 on top. Works really well either way. It's also nice down in the low range, G7, F sharp 7 with a sharp 9 on top that time. Or G9 to F sharp 7 to B minor. Remember that, as always, the lesson materials are available at the links in the description. You can get them via my Patreon, or you can buy them as a one-off purchase at the Gumroad link. Thanks, guys. So to kick things off, let's have a look at which portions of our pentatonic shapes we're going to be using. Let's take a look at B minor pentatonic shape number 1. So this would be at the 7th fret on the low E string. Sure you're all very familiar with that shape. Now let's chop it in half and deal with only the upper octave. So this would be starting on the D string, 9th fret. So that's going to be our chunk of shape 1 that we're going to be using. Now what about shape number 2? This would be the one that begins at the 10th fret on the low E string. If you're not familiar with that, I recommend working on all 5 of your pentatonic shapes. A quick and easy little tip that I like to use in order to find which note each of the 5 shapes would begin on is to think about, first of all, which 5 notes make up your pentatonic scale. So in the case of B minor, that's the B, the D, the E, the F sharp and the A. Now it could be good to write those across the page. Now, shape 1 begins on the first of those 5 notes, so that begins on B. Shape number 2 begins on the 2nd note, D. Shape 3 begins on the 3rd note, E, but we're staying on the low E string each time, so we're going to progressively move along the fretboard with this system. So shape number 3, shape number 4 would start on the 4th note, that was the F sharp. Maybe I'll move down the octave. And then shape number 5 begins on the 5th note, that was A. With all of these shapes, add in that flattened fifth to make it the blues scale. Again, make sure to learn those 5 shapes, get them fluent. But for the purposes of our lead study today, the only part of shape 2 we're going to use is going to be the top 3 strings. So starting on the 9th fret of the G string. And again, you could add the flattened fifth into there to make it the blues scale instead of simply the pentatonic minor. So finally, to summarize, these are the 2 shapes we're dealing with today. From the D string up in shape 1, and from the G string up in shape 2. They can be connected really nicely as well. Let's have a quick talk about that. So commonly, it's nice to move along the G string from shape 1 to shape 2. Now notice how I planned ahead there. If I know I'm going to be escaping shape 1 and moving into shape 2, I go for the 2nd finger on the G string 9th fret and slide into the 11th fret. Now I've got this little blues triangle, as it's often known, which is really just a small portion of shape 2, isn't it? It's just the 2nd finger on the 11th fret, and then 1st and 3rd fingers playing the top 2 strings at 10 and 12. But now notice when I go back into shape 1, I'm going to go 3rd finger on the 11th fret, so that when I slide back to shape 1, I'm landing in the right position. So when I'm escaping shape 1, 2nd finger leads the way. Coming back, 3rd finger leads the way. That's a nice way of thinking about it. If you're connecting along the B string, let the 3rd finger do all the heavy lifting on the way up. On the way back, let the 1st finger take the slide. Obviously these aren't hard and fast rules, but these are ways that to me feel ergonomically pleasing. Okay, what about on the 1st string? It's going to be the same thing again. 3rd finger leading the way on the way out. 1st finger sliding on the way back. So with all of our prep out of the way, let's get into the lead study in itself. Phrase number 1. Well and truly within that blues triangle portion of shape 2. So 12th fret on the B string, which of course would be your root note, pulling off to 10, 10 on the top string, 12 on the 2nd string. Straight away take note that we use a lot of vibrato here. We're going for that B.B. King vibe after all, and he was very well known for his great vibrato. If you've not seen my lesson on the Chicago blues sound, do check that out. I go into a lot of depth on the technique of vibrato and how to really get it sounding sweet. In a quick summary here, I'm going to just say basically that you want to make sure it's all coming from the wrist, not the fingers. So the fingers should just be placeholders, and really it's the wrist that pivots. And whether it's slow vibrato, or fast, or wide vibrato, or narrow vibrato, all of those little variables are things to work on and make sure you get a good solid control over on any finger as well. You know, 1st finger, it's still no different, it's the wrist doing the heavy lifting. Should be the same as when you bend strings. I noticed straight away that a lot of beginners try and bend from the fingers and not the wrist, and they can never get the bend to where they want it. For me, the proof that you're bending correctly from the wrist is that you should be able to overbend massively. If you're just starting out with your string bends and you find that you're struggling to reach the pitch of the note and that the strings feel like they're slipping from under the fingers, then that's because you're leading with the fingers. If you do it from the wrist, you'll very easily be able to get triple bends and overshoot those bends. Because you're squeezing with the wrist, you're putting that natural grip that we have to work. So bear all of those things in mind, because this lead study very much focuses on good bending and good vibrato technique. Speaking of which, our 2nd phrase begins with a full bend at the 12th fret of the top E string, and then we come down the scale to the root note at the 12th fret of the B string, where we had some good vibrato. And then we do a pull off to 10 and hammer back to 12 and add some more vibrato. Third phrase. So a couple of hammer-ons in there. Firstly from 10 to 12 on the B, and then 10 to 12 on the top E as well. A bit more vibrato. This next phrase has two bends in a row, both to different heights. The first bend is at 12 on the top E, up a full step, that takes us to the next note of your B minor pentatonic scale. We then reset the string and do about a quarter bend, or maybe up to about a half, just to hint at that blues note, the flattened fifth. And it's kind of a late bend. There's a certain feel to these sorts of bends. And then 10 on the top E, 10 on the B, 12 on the B, with some good vibrato again. So check these bends out. So basically straight up to the full step, then the second bend has a kind of late whip to it, just before we move on to the next note. Makes all the difference, right? Those things are the sound of the blues. Then we're going to use our second finger to slide into the peak of our blues triangle. Remember, that's just a small portion of shape 2 of your pentatonic minor scale. Second finger slides from 9 to 11. And then 10th fret of the B string, hold the note, and then add the 12th fret via a hammer-on and make it a staccato note. So it cuts off very quickly. Look out for the dots above the notation in the lesson materials for this. Even if you don't read notation, if you're looking at the tab, just look above in the notation now and then for those dots, because they're your staccato notes. And as we said in our Chicago blues lesson, they're such an important part of blues phrasing. These kinds of late little dabs onto a note, you know, they're like an intake of breath. Now for this final chunk of the first solo, we're just going to stay on the top two strings of shape 2 and use nothing else. A bit of staccato, again look out for those dots above the notes. A hammer-on, slide, back and forth, hammer-on, pull-off, and another hammer-on. It's amazing how much you can get out of a small group of notes if you apply hammer-ons, pull-offs and slides. Our second solo kicks off with some phrases that are more rhythmic based, where the note choice is very limited, just using parts of our blues triangle in shape 2, but the timing is the key with this stuff. So check it out. 3, 4, 1. Notice how those staccato notes really help to punctuate the timing, especially on those hammer-ons. You'll also have to work on getting your vibrato engaged and fully up to speed very quickly. No time to accelerate it, you've got to get straight into that flow. Also, we're adding a little subtle bend here. One of those late pull-offs to a staccato note. And then we have this, going back to what we mentioned earlier, sliding in on the third finger on the G string to the 11th fret and grabbing the 10th fret of the B string with the second finger. The reason we're using the third finger is we don't intend to stay in shape 2, we want to go straight back to shape 1. Let these two notes overlap a little bit as well. This is a really nice kind of harmonica lick. Hear it all the time. It's very Elmore James in flavour. Then we go to another full step bend at the 12th fret of the top E string. Add some vibrato at the peak of the bend, then come down the scale to the 10th fret before going to the B string 12th fret and giving that a full step bend, which technically takes us out of the minor pentatonic. That note we're bending to would be like the 9, which is a great sound. You know, a minor 9th chord is a beautiful sounding chord. And then we push that bend another half step higher, taking us to the minor third, which of course is part of the pentatonic. And then we play that 12th fret, but in its natural state. But we don't actually re-pick it. We get it all from the initial pick. It's really good to work on the accuracy of your bends and get the pitches dialed in perfectly. Let your ears be the judge, because that of course is the way to measure all of these things. Whole step bend, another half, bring it back down to earth. Got a bit of a Dave Gilmour vibe to it. And then we're back to this 10 on the B string, play it twice and then do a hammer on to the 12th fret. Add some hefty vibrato again. And then very similar to what we had earlier, sliding out to that harmonica lick, back to shape 1 with a very late pull off to a staccato 7th fret of the D string. And for our third and final solo, we're going to get a little nastier with it. We're going to switch to the bridge pickup for that more biting and bright tone. And we're going to start with this little 2-note pickup on the top 2 strings that we mentioned a lot in the Chicago blues lesson. You know, don't overlook the powerful simplicity of starting a phrase with those 2 notes. Such a big part of blues vocabulary. Our second phrase, again, is very much rhythmically based. Lots of punctuated and sharp little rhythms. Again, making sure that we can add our vibrato and get it up to full speed very quickly. Coming down the scale, and then a full bend at 9 on the G. Let it come down. Some hammer-ons, and then one of these country bends. That's a full bend at 9 on the G again. Support the string and hold it at the peak of the bend. Add the little finger to 10 on the B. Pick the G string, let it come down. And then slide back and forth from 7 to 9 and back. Root note. And then again, one of those very late staccato pull-offs to the 7th fret. And then a bit of a callback to one of our earlier blues triangle phrases. Now staying in this position, we're going to play... So we're hammering on from 10 to 12 on the B, some fast vibrato at 10 on the top E, really sting that note, and then pull off 12 to 10 on the B. Now if we're looking at our B minor pentatonic scale, on the top string here we have frets 10 and 12, but we could also add the blues note at the 13th fret. Let's take those notes and let's do this little pattern. So we're picking 12, hammer on to 13, pull back to 12, pull to 10, and then re-pick, and then do it again, and then a 4th time. All of the rhythms there need to be even, and we're playing them as 16ths. Then we go to the B string, pull off 12 to 10, play 12 with some good vibrato, and then 10 on the top E, with a very late quarter bend, one of those whipped bends again. Hold the note, and then add it at the tail end. Our final lick begins with this Hendrixy double stop. 10th fret of the top 2 strings, hammer on to 12 on the B, be careful not to block the top E. And then come down from shape 2 to shape 1 using the 3rd finger in a slide. Pull off to the 1st finger. That can take a bit of practice. Slide, pull off. And then down to the D string with a pull off and then a very strong final note. So tone is very important with this stuff. As I said in the Chicago blues lesson, a lot of it comes down to picking technique and those little touches in the left hand, you know, the staccato notes, the pull-offs, the hammer-ons, the vibrato, the bends. Good control over that stuff gives you good tone. It doesn't come from amps, pedals, and guitars. Now make sure when you're picking this stuff, you go with some real conviction and really strike the strings to make the notes bloom. Weak-sounding pick attack really just completely kills the whole blues vibe. Now check it out. For example, if I play very light, sounds pretty, right? Sounds very clean. Dig in harder to bring out that overdrive. Now I know it makes me the bringer of bad news and a bit of a sore thumb, but I really do want to stress that the importance with this stuff is not gear, it's technique. But with that said, let me take you through the gear that I'm using for this video. So this is my Gibson ES335. It's got a pair of Sunbear PAF pickups in there right now. Beautiful pickups. Very low wind. So they have a really kind of nice bright tone. I find that overwound humbuckers just lose all the top end. The overdrive pedal that I'm using today is the Cornerstone Gladio SC, and I have the gain set very low, almost completely off, because I want to choose via pick attack how much overdrive I'm hearing. Clean. Bit more gainy. Bridge pickup can help push it over the edge. But again, picking lightly, still sounds pretty clean. And the amp I'm using today is the Emprize Falcon reverb. It's basically a clone of a vintage deluxe reverb type of circuit, but with a couple of modern refinements. I've compared it side by side with my old 69 deluxe reverb, and it does sound extremely close. The strings I'm currently using on here are Diodario 11 to 49s. They're just their standard nickel strings, not the NYXLs, which I normally would use, but this is all I had lying around at the time. Plectrum is a Dunlop Jazz 3. As long as the plectrum is pretty stiff, I don't really mind what it is too much. So make sure to listen to a lot of blues players, B.B. King especially being one of them, of course. If you really want to get that blues sound, you've got to hear the sound in your head before you know how to get it with your hands. So I really hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Do let me know down in the comments below how you're getting along with these pieces, and I'll see you guys next week for another lesson. All right, take care.